Let me explain, my chair. Let me explain. Please just let me explain for a moment.
Welcome to WatchMojoUK, and today we're counting down the biggest idiots, politicians and audience members alike, on BBC Question Time.
I appreciate that, and I've looked at the data myself. I mean, the data I believe you're talking about is...
Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
Number 20, Iain Duncan Smith.
Most new claimants of housing benefit are in work. They don't have enough money to pay extortionate rents.
We were only 2 years into the coalition in this 2012 recording of Question Time, which saw left-wing journalist Owen Jones go against Iain Duncan Smith, who was Secretary of State for Work and Pensions at the time.
But there is a point as well that has to be made about the treatment of disabled people in this country.
As such, the conversation went to benefits, with IDS claiming that the Tories were doing good work with the DWP because they were getting more and more people off benefits.
Brian McArdle, 57 years old, paralysed down one side, blind in one eye, he couldn't speak. He died one day after being found fit for work by ATOS.
Cue Owen Jones making him look a fool by bringing up numerous incidents where terminally ill people were declared fit for work by DWP assessments and tragically passed away days later. Despite this, IDS stood by his cabinet record.
We are changing their lives. I'm proud of doing that. Getting them off benefit is what we're going to do.
Number 19, Peter Hitchens. In this 2011 recording, devout Christian and journalist Peter Hitchens was on the panel to give his opinions on sex education.
And to become instead a post-Lady Chatterley society in which sex was like tennis. It was just something you did, it was pleasure.
He was largely against sex education because he believed it would lead to a rise in teenage pregnancy, and that a return to Protestant values, like we had before the swinging 60s, would help the country.
And they get sex education, which is actually all about taking away their innocence. And all these forces combined, that's what...
Today, you'd struggle to find anybody who thinks that an abstinence, marriage-centric approach to sex education in high schools is remotely effective. And even in 2011, the mood was against Hitchens for this bizarre stance.
What else is the purpose of sex education? We're told again and again that it's supposed to stop underage pregnancy.
The audience could be heard booing him as he linked an alleged moral decline in Britain to the publication of Lady Chatterley's Lover and pop music.
It's demonstrably so. If that's okay, you're in favour of the sexualisation of children, then we've got that straight.
Number 18, Douglas Carswell. This bust-up was between Piers Morgan and UKIP MP Douglas Carswell, who defected from the Tories.
You have avoided responding to something that Nigel Farage said the other day.
At the time, Nigel Farage was running a campaign based on some spurious claims that people with HIV were trying to claim asylum in the UK so that they could get treatment on the NHS. Morgan went after Carswell for his complete lack of integrity, as Carswell's own father was a leading expert on the treatment of HIV.
And I would like to ask you whether you felt ashamed of what Nigel Farage said about the stigmatisation of foreigners coming here with such a crippling, awful disease.
Of course, Carswell had no real response to Morgan's questions, and it didn't take long for him to jump ship from UKIP too, only 3 years later.
So why would Nigel Farage isolate HIV as a stick to beat people with? Why stigmatise those people?
Can I finish the point?
Number 17, Alastair Campbell.
My point is that actually they shouldn't be looking for something that different, take the personalities out of it.
Though he's widely feared in Westminster as Tony Blair's notorious spin doctor, Alastair Campbell was royally called out for his behaviour in government in this 2016 taping. He was up against John McDonnell, Labour's shadow chancellor at the time, arguing about Jeremy Corbyn, who was resoundingly popular with the Labour membership, hence why they voted him in.
Why is it nauseating?
Because you're the person, above all else, who actually created a political environment where no one believed a word a politician said after a bit.
I don't agree. I'm sorry.
But Campbell didn't want to accept that the party members had democratically chosen someone he didn't like, and was brought up on this by McDonnell, who attacked Campbell for his relentless spin when Blair was in power.
You lost us 5 million votes in that process and set us up to fail.
We won 3 general elections.
Now, what the reason?
Number 16, Nick Griffin.
And it's that difference, by the way, the fact that the BNP defines itself on race, which distinguishes it from every other political party I can think of.
Former leader of the BNP, which bizarrely used to be a major player in British politics, Nick Griffin was deeply controversial when he was brought onto Question Time.
Finally, my father was in the RAF during the Second World War, while Mr. Straw's father was in prison for refusing to fight Adolf Hitler.
But with the BNP polling highly, many thought he deserved his chance to speak, and then he squandered it by uttering complete nonsense. Most notably, he attacked Labour MP Jack Straw for his father being a pacifist during the Second World War, and then refused to say whether he believed the Holocaust had happened or not.
Wait a minute, what's that got to do with the issue? What's that got to do with the issue?
Did he want people to fight against Hitler, or does he want to reenact Hitler's policies? Who knows? And he's no longer in frontline politics.
All you're thinking of doing is trying to sort of poison politics. And yes, you are. Poison politics and poison the minds of people in this country.
Number 15, Nadim Zahawi.
But for you, honestly, to sit there and try and defend this, what I haven't heard from anybody at senior level in this party in the last 10 days is one word: sorry.
Another showing from Piers Morgan, this time he was going for Nadim Zahawi, who decided that rather than take responsibility for Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget on behalf of the Conservative Party, he was going to blame Putin.
She cut, and as Wilfred said, you cut and you move forward. We've got 24 months to do it. But Piers, now hold a second. I'm going to tell you right now, if you give me a chance. Sure.
For a while, Putin's invasion of Ukraine was the party line about why costs were rising so high, even though the electorate saw right through it. As such, the audience ended up laughing at Zahawi when he tried to blame Putin for our domestic problems.
Oh, come on. Because he's using
come on. You can't say sorry because Vladimir Putin may not like it.
I said to you...
Nadim, people are laughing.
The war in Ukraine certainly factored into the energy bills crisis, but we're not sure Putin forced Liz Truss to make that budget.
Good thing. But for you to say that Putin has nothing to do with inflation is...
I didn't say that.
No, he didn't say that.
I didn't say that.
Sorry,
I said he had nothing to do with stopping you apologising.
Okay. Number 14, exterminate.
That we're having yet another hand-wringing debate without a single mention of the concept of punishment. And I know...
When this man in the audience began talking about knife crime, it sounded like everybody was on the same page where punitive justice is concerned. Knife crime is a major problem, particularly in cities and deprived areas. And so far, there haven't been very many solutions proposed.
For people, and don't forget, it is a particular breed of human being that can repeatedly put a knife into another person.
But maybe we don't need to go this far, as the man suggested that people who stab other people to death should be, quote, exterminated.
And those people should be dealt with like the cancer they are, and they should be exterminated.
Well,
his fellow audience members quickly changed their tune. After all, we haven't had the death penalty in this country for decades, and according to most polls, the majority of people are against bringing it back. Number 13, Priti Patel.
And actually, on that basis alone, I would actually support the reintroduction of capital punishment to serve as a deterrent.
Speaking of the death penalty, here's Priti Patel and Iain Hislop to argue for and against the reintroduction of capital punishment. In this classic clip, Patel, always with her finger on the pulse of the country's right-wingers, advocates for bringing it back as a deterrent.
Over the years, large numbers of these cases have been found to be entirely wrong, and the men convicted, almost all of the men, there's a couple of women, have been found innocent.
However, Hislop quickly made her look a fool by saying that capital punishment doesn't actually work when errors in the British justice system, which Private Eye frequently exposes, lead to people being wrongfully convicted and, potentially, put to death. Is any crime worth risking innocent lives to deter genuine offenders? Perhaps not.
Well,
it's not a deterrent killing the wrong people.
Well, no, capital punishment would act as a deterrent.
Number 12, Ireland/Ireland.
The DUP and the EU seem to be really levering the Ireland backstop thing for the whole of Brexit.
Following Brexit, Northern Ireland became a major issue. Many were deeply concerned that Northern Ireland leaving the EU could lead to a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. potentially destroying the Good Friday Agreement. But this bloke in the audience had an answer to the problem, which was simply to reunify Ireland. His justification? Because Ireland sounds just like the word island, so it would be easier for everybody that way.
You know, it's going to sound crazy, but Ireland being referred to as Ireland, the island of Ireland, why don't we try and just get that as an island again, and then we can carry on with our own thing.
Of course, he got groans and boos from the audience members who were against this, as it would break up the union. Not that he seemed to care.
Just no longer have Northern Ireland
break up the union?
Yes, break up, no longer have it as part of
just
the United Kingdom.
Ireland, the whole of Ireland.
Number 11, Ed Miliband.
What worries me is you're about to put Ed Balls back in as a Chancellor, and he called that letter a joke.
Poor Mr. Miliband. Throughout the 2015 election campaign, his only one as leader of the opposition, he just couldn't catch a break and never became popular with the general public.
No, it doesn't. That wasn't the question I asked you. I asked you why on earth I should trust a Chancellor who thinks a letter like that was a joke.
In this Leaders' Debate episode of Question Time, he was roundly criticised by the public for the actions of the Labour Party upon leaving Downing Street in 2010.
Yes. Do you accept that when Labour was last in power, it overspent?
No, I don't, and I know you may not agree with that. But let me just say very clearly.
Specifically, they were arguing about a letter left behind in Whitehall for the incoming Tories, warning that there was no money left, which the public didn't see the funny side of. It's hardly surprising that the Tories won the majority after this display.
Thank you very much, Mr. November.
Thank you.
Number 10, Katy Hopkins. Hopkins has a bad habit of never getting herself invited back onto most shows she appears on, and this happened after her inflammatory Question Time appearance.
I think women actually don't want equal treatment. They couldn't handle it if they got it, quite a number of them. It's a tough world out there. What?
While debating whether Andy Gray should have been sacked from Sky back in 2011 for saying women didn't know enough to be football referees, Hopkins went on to advocate against men and women having equal rights.
What a lot of women are actually asking for, and you can look aghast at this, is special treatment.
She said women can't handle equal rights, and then went after Karen Brady off of The Apprentice. You know, the show Katy Hopkins quit because she couldn't handle the task of getting enough childcare for her kids.
It's a tough world out there, and I don't think Karen Brady and others are doing us any favours by putting this sort of debate out there.
Number 9, Joey Barton.
The mainstream political parties are sitting up and take notice, but all you represent to me as UKIP is the best of a bad bunch.
Who could forget this legendary absurd moment from ex-footballer and on-off football manager Joey Barton? He was on the panel that week and decided to voice his opinions about UKIP, describing the contemporary political situation in his own unique way.
I'm somewhere and there was 4 really ugly girls. I'm thinking, well, she's not the worst, because that's all you are. That's all you are.
He was immediately attacked for sexism by Louise Bowes, serving as a UKIP MEP at the time, who said that Barton proved that footballers were unintelligent and shouldn't go on to shows like Question Time.
He basically fulfills the mission, doesn't he, that footballers' brains are in their feet? Well, because he's absolutely proved that to me tonight.
The entire situation was bizarre, considering that Barton was trying to understand the appeal of UKIP, only to be called out by UKIP's nearest representative. Number 8, Eric Pickles. Have you ever had a real job? Well, if you're Shadow Cabinet Minister Eric Pickles, perhaps not, because during this 2009 edition of Question Time, he seemed to have no idea what a real job is.
How far are you away from Westminster?
37 miles.
And you need 2 houses.
This was in the immediate aftermath of the MP's expenses scandal, in which the Telegraph got the unredacted copies of MP expenses through a Freedom of Information request and began publishing all the grubby details.
I have never, ever claimed my full allowance. I have always claimed the amount. I publish them. I've always published them on my website.
Pickles was claiming for a home in Whitehall, despite living only 37 miles outside the capital, saying that it was necessary because MPs have to be at work on time some days. Shocking, we know.
Don't you think that's a bit hypocritical?
Okay.
Number 7, Heckler. This strange man decided he was sick of waiting for the microphone to speak and started shouting across the studio at panellist Gina Miller.
It was a hung parliament. I'm not a Conservative, so I didn't lose anything. Excuse me.
This was in the wake of the 2017 general election, with people still debating the likelihood of Theresa May going into coalition with the Democratic Unionist Party to get a majority.
Even if there is no deal with the DUP, the government can operate because they won.
She did go into coalition, but as we know now, fears about the DUP having any influence in Westminster were unfounded.
Well, now, hang on.
No, we
Listen,
don't.
I think you ought to leave, you know, because...
He was attacking the Tory ministers present too, for continuing to pursue a policy of austerity, but was so disruptive he was ultimately chucked out by David Dimbleby. Number 6. Lawrence Fox.
Well, you know, can we have the cottage back and your HRHs?
This was the moment that led to the deterioration of Lawrence Fox's public image, as he was brought onto Question Time to give his thoughts on the Duchess of Sussex, saying that the royal family and British presses were institutionally racist.
Let's be really clear about what this is. Let's call it by its name. It's racism. She's a black woman, and she has been torn to pieces.
While Fox's views weren't as outrageous in this programme as they've since become, with the benefit of hindsight, we know he was only a hair's breadth away from losing his mind completely. He continued trying to pursue a career in politics, running for Mayor of London in 2021 and getting less than 2% of the votes. He's since announced he's leaving London completely to get away from the authoritarian ULEZ.
We're the most tolerant, lovely country in Europe. Let's celebrate our women. It's not racism. It's so easy to throw the charge of racism at everybody, and it's really starting to get boring.
What worries me about your...
Number 5. Racist woman.
68 million people now live in England, going up, UN estimates. At what stage does the panel and people think this country has had enough?
This woman believed that the UK was facing an overpopulation problem and soon began advocating for closing the country's borders completely to absolutely everybody. She was wrong with her numbers, saying that England has a population of 68 million, but that was the population total for all 4 of the devolved nations.
You've got people flooding into this country that cannot speak English. I've come from London. In the National Health Service, everything's written in different languages. How much is that costing?
She also seemed to think that the NHS was running out of money because it was spending so much to make signs in different languages, and that people were coming over here as tourists so that they could have free babies on the NHS. This was all based on no evidence, of course.
What sort of country is allowing this tourism to come in? You arrive in a plane, you get free service, you can have your babies, you can just carry on having it all for free.
Number 4. Bananas.
I was voting Remain, and at the very last minute I changed my decision and I went to leave. And
less than a year after Brexit had been voted for by the British public, this woman appeared on Question Time to explain her reasons from switching from Remain to Leave. Yes, this is the infamous Brexit banana woman, who said that she was sick of the EU mandating that our bananas had to be a certain shape.
I go to a supermarket and a banana is straight. I'm just sick of the silly rules that come out of Europe.
She was one example of an absurd European law Britain would be able to do away with. But then, in 2023, years after Johnson had finally got Brexit done, it was revealed that actually we're not going to get rid of the banana rules. They'll remain straight for the time being.
It was bananas what did it, was it, for you?
No, it was more than bananas.
Number 3. Philosophy degree. Nearly 2 years into the COVID pandemic, Question Time floored a debate primarily about vaccinating or not vaccinating, while the COVID-19 vaccines were still being rolled out.
Is nothing he says credible to you?
Well,
given what an eminent scientist he is.
During one round, Fiona Bruce specifically asked for an unvaccinated audience member to give their opinion, and this bloke put his hand up.
I studied philosophy at university, and I learned that an appeal to an authority is not an automatic win of an argument.
He then began arguing with the epidemiologists on the panel. He just didn't believe anything the scientists on the panel were saying, claiming that he'd been doing his own research and that he should be listened to about communicable diseases because he has a philosophy degree.
Let's let Robin answer that, and then I'll come to some other people in the audience.
It's nonsense. He didn't invent mRNA vaccine.
Number 2. Top 5%.
I'd like to call out Labour as liars
I am one of them people that he will tax more, and I am nowhere near in the top 5.
Usually it's the politicians who are completely out of touch with the general public, but this man proved that that's not always the case.
And we're not going to raise income tax for anybody apart from the top 5% of earners.
I am not in the top 5% of earners.
So we're not going to increase your income tax.
But you are.
He went after the Labour Party for being liars, for claiming in its manifesto that it wasn't going to increase taxes for anybody other than the top 5%. Though he initially had some audience support, when he revealed that he himself earned over £80,000 a year and believed that the majority of the country had incomes like that, the sentiment quickly changed.
So hang on, let's just be clear. So you're suggesting you would raise income tax on those earning over £80,000. You're saying that would affect you because you earn over that sum?
Yes.
We're sure millions of working people in the UK could only dream of earning as much as 80 grand a year.
Yes, and I'm not in the top 5%.
I think that is the top 5%, isn't it?
I'm not.
Number 1. Dinosaurs.
Do you think the RMT is taking the wrong approach? Yes, and look what happened to the dinosaurs.
She was only on screen for a short amount of time, probably because the BBC quickly realised that she was a lunatic who shouldn't be given the microphone back, but she sticks in our memories nonetheless.
We've got a society where people in full-time employment are having to take state benefits, and some of them are having to go to food banks.
She was going after the RMT, with Mick Lynch on the panel to talk about the train strikes. She thought that the RMT needed to embrace the technology the government wanted it to use, and that it was living in the past. She then implied that, like the dinosaurs, RMT workers were soon going to be wiped out, as if the dinosaurs going on strike was the reason the asteroid hit the Earth.
Well, they were around for a very long time.
They're not with us now, though, are they?
Years.
Let us know in the comments which delusional question time guests you remember the most strongly.
That we should close the borders, completely close the borders, because it's got to the stage now there's no education.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojoUK and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.